Hello and welcome back to awtoolbox.com. My name is Glenn Keller, and in this video we are starting our dive into administration work inside of Active Workspace and the Teamcenter platform. So what we're going to start with is just kind of an overall understanding of what administration inside of Teamcenter looks like. So there are a couple of different roles as somebody who interacts with the software that you'll take, and those roles depend on kind of what the tasks are that you do to the software, or with the software rather. The first role is a user. Now any of our using courses or topics are going to pertain to those users, and those are individuals that are going to be interacting with one of these two interfaces, either the rich client or the Active Workspace. Now the users are primarily going to work with data that already exists inside of the software. So they're going to use the tools built into the software to search and filter and open up various elements, create new data, analyze structures, work with CAD tools to actually save off new data and design product. All of those things are under the user category. Now, administrators kind of represent a ability to change the system. So they're going to be the admins. They're going to be primarily responsible with changing things that interact with the interface, specifically the style sheets, like these pages over here that you can see, workflows in the system, how the system displays data, the structure of the data in the background through the use of what's called the BMIDE tool. And so much more. So just remember, administrators change something about how you interact with the system, whereas users just use the system. Now, there are two different types of administrators. These are traditional roles that Siemens has passed over the years. Now, we bucket them all into one role, and we'll kind of define why we think that. The two types of administrators are administrators that work primarily with the administration tools that are available in the software. So administrators, in our definition, which may not be the right one, but in our definition, administrators are those that can log in as a DBA role in the software. Notice I cannot as this user, and then get access to a bunch of new tools that you can use to modify the software. So if I log in as my admin, and then in here I come back up to my profile and I change my group to DBA, I would be able to go ahead and edit those tools. Now I forgot this user isn't a DBA, so I can perform an administrative task by logging in as a DBA user. And then inside of here, you'll see I'm now DBA. And by out of the box, you'll have to switch to Active Admin to see any links or buttons that are going to associate you to a DBA role and those types of tasks. Now, your site may have configured the tiles to be available here on the author location, and that's perfectly fine. But out of the box, you'll go to Active Admin. And you'll see there's a bunch of tiles here. Now, if you've been working with administration throughout the years, you'll notice there's a lot more tiles here than there used to be in the Active Admin location. So we've got the ability to add, modify, delete, and manage your organization in the people. The ability to control your permissions using Access Manager. Workflow Designer, to control your workflows, your jobs, the approval processes. Table Configurator for your table column configurations, and this one is kind of newer in the newer versions. So this is great. We used to have to do this in XML, and now we're going to be taking a look at it in here. We also now have Query Builder in 2412, and we're excited to get into that application and show you about it. From our overall look, it does look very similar to what we had in the Teamcenter Rich client. We also have viewer administration tools, which are specific tools to Active Workspace to help you see how many processes are being run by our visualization system and some details about them. And then some additional tools like assignment lists for workflows, building those out to automate the selections, and then indexer and search administration, something new that we can take a look at to help optimize and check on our searches. So there's a lot of administrative capabilities that standard users don't get if you're the DBA, and you can use those, such as the people location, to go in and make adjustments. So in our case, my admin user, if I do a search up here, and you can see administrator and admin 01 are here. If I come down and just kind of find the DBA location, so back this up a little bit, hit search. If I come down to DBA and expand the tree, I can select the DBA role, and then I can add my DBA user to it. So I can create new, I can search, I can say admin. So now that user will be in that group and role with those permissions. You can always look at the user and change the permissions on things, but now I should be able to log out and log in as the admin 01. Now this teaches you a couple of things. So first of all, if you have a user and you don't have that active admin workspace and you don't have the tiles on this page for the administrative functionality, then you now know how to add yourself using the people tile to the DBA group and role if you're allowed. The other thing you know is how to validate that, coming into the group, selecting DBA, and then you'll see that it kind of switches the screen, and then you just need to validate whether your workspace you have access to Active Admin. And then at that point, I always like to click the buttons, make sure that all the pages are there. If a page isn't there, it's typically not allowed, or it's not installed or available in that workspace. So you can see each one of these is opening up great. So inside of Active Workspace, they give you a lot of capabilities here, but you also have capabilities in other locations. So you could, depending on your business rules, associate some of the user end tasks to be administrative tasks. So just things that you can also build are things like ID display rules. You can see query builders accessible to users over here. Workflow designer is here because I'm a DBA. There's reports that you could tune. You could tune active folders. There's a lot of things, even outside of the scope of that page, that you can end up looking at. Now, it's not everything, and that's why the rich client comes into play. So the rich client is the older tool. It's the tool that we've used for years in the Teamcenter platform. And this tool can do a lot. It's a little bit more of an installed tool. It does have a high overhead with Java maintenance and things like that. But in here, if we come into Window, Open Perspective, you'll see a variety of administrative views and perspectives that we had that we don't have anymore. So things like, and it doesn't mean that we don't have them, it just means that it's not a specific page. So things like ADA licensing, we have Access Manager. If you look through these, a lot of these are like BOM components, and BOM components all work in the content page now if they're supported. Briefcase, you can now move briefcase components back and forth. Classification is in Active Workspace now. Command suppression is done with the use of those workspaces and can be controlled in Active Workspace's UI if need be now. Debug is the browser tools, and then so on and so forth. Some other highlight reels on here are like Multi-Structure Manager is kind of adapted to EasyPlan, and other tools relating to SLM and MBOMs. You have PLM and TCXML export-import administration. That has not been ported over to Active Workspace yet. That's kind of a robust tool. You're building closure rules and all kinds of different things in there. So we can interact with them. We can definitely export and select them in Active Workspace, but this is still maintained in the rich client. If you go down, some other big ones. Project you can do in Active Workspace now. And most of these are just components of Active Workspace. So Report Builder and this PLM XML, TCXML are two of the big ones. Another big one that I would miss if the rich client went away is in the organization app. If you open this up, there's a easy configuration point for sites, volumes, and these are essential locations as well as your license server that you need to come to on occasion during installations. So I would like to see an option for that in Active Workspace as well. But overall, these are the types of tools that administrators need to understand going into the Teamcenter platform to support a customer. Now, those types of administrators are working with preferences, and they're working with style sheets and workflows, organization, access, yada, yada, yada. But there is another level of administration called BMIDE, or Data Model Administration. Now, I believe that both of them go hand in hand. If you are going to be a front-end administrator, you need to understand the back-end schema, or at least have some type of a coordinator between the two groups, understand the back-end schema to help you with your tasks. The Business Modeler IDE tool is the administrative tool that we use to manage the data model, and we'll get into that here in a second, but this is a more lower level type of a role. So the role is going to essentially deploy changes to the data model, which updates the database. And some overlap with an infrastructure architect or a Teamcenter architect on the infrastructure side would be helpful before doing deployments into a production environment or something. So again, two completely different roles, but they have a huge overlap, and you really need to understand both if you're going to be an effective administrator in the system. The other tool, so all those tools are administration. Data model administration is ran in a tool called the Business Modeler IDE. Now, in my deployment with Deployment Center, I did not see that get added as a shortcut here. So I'm going to just simply come in here. I could find this in Deployment Center or in the TIM if you're still using the TIM. You can go into the install, go to Components, and then inside of the Components display, I'm going to refresh, and it has timed me out here. So let's go in here and do DC admin. So if I go into my environment and I go to the components view, I can see where the BMIDE was installed, and what I'm looking for is the launch script for that. So if I come into components, let it load up what's in there, you can see I have a 2-tier Business Modeler IDE here. And this is what you need. It is available standalone, but you do lose a couple of features if you have it standalone. It is most effective if you have a way to connect it to an environment, which we will demonstrate as we get through more and more of these courses. In here, though, you'll have a general installation path. So this is just pointing me to my TC root location, but if I minimize this and I go to that location, not my FSC, but let's go to the C drive, apps, Siemens, Teamcenter 2412, TC root. There's a BMIDE folder right here. And inside of there, you'll have 3 things. You'll have a workspace, which is essentially where your file will get worked on. So the BMIDE tool is an Eclipse-based application that essentially works against a workspace. Anything it does, it modifies inside of this folder, and then when you save, it commits those changes. If I go back up to the BMIDE here, we have templates, which if you're modifying the database is essentially the Teamcenter schema with other relative schemas set on top of it. So things like the base schema, the foundation, Teamcenter Foundation. And then if you wanted change management, there would be other types of objects added to your build for change management. And each time you add one of those server features, server-side features specifically, it adds a new XML file here. And if it's not here, your template may not know about it, and you may be missing out on some features that you could take advantage of. So pay attention to some of our installation topics on the BMIDE and templates. and we'll go through them as well once we get deeper into this. But to launch the BMIDE tool, in the client folder, there is a bmide.bat file right here, or just a BMIDE file for other operating systems. But if I run as administrator or open, it depends on your permissions. I'm an admin in here, so you'll see the little flash, and it's an administrative application. This will open up, and I've already got a template kind of created in here to show and tell a bit with. But basically, you can pick your workspace. Where do you want it to save stuff to? You could have that dumping into an Azure or an Azure repository so that you could source control changes over time if you needed to and package up. But if you have a project in here, it'll simply load and it will pull in, as you can see, the foundation template, just kind of right down here, which is all of the basics for Teamcenter. So at minimum, you'll have that. And then if I have additional templates, it'll give me additional things that I can upload to this to give me more options, more constants, more object types, more properties. Each time I overlay a feature, that's what it's going to do. And you could see it did it quickly, but there was a change management template that also got loaded. So in here, you've got a basic overview. You've got a list of, let's call them editors on the right-hand side over here. Depending on what you open, you have multiple tabs across the top, and you've got a nice, easy-to-use toolbar at the top. And then you can interact with these objects and create custom object types underneath of them. And you can interact with things like properties, how they interact with the system, with constants. You can attach naming rules, LOVs, and package all of that into a nice, neat deployable package that then you can install into the system. Now, the reason that there's an overlap in this tool is if I come back into Active Workspace and we take a look at some of those administrative features. So I come into Active Admin. You may not need a whole bunch of understanding of the BMIDE for the People tool. However, the Access Manager tool, if you were to come in here, there is a lot of class definitions, and classes pertain to what you have in the BMIDE, the object types in the system. So you need to understand the object types at that root level in the BMIDE. And if you come in here, you'll see references to things like POM object right here. So if we look, POM object is referenced, and you actually have to understand this at the lower level. If I were to dive into these, you also need to understand things like what owning group security is and other elements that may be overlapped between the two. In addition to that application, Workflow Designer uses what are called workflow handlers in the templates. So if I come into a basic template like this one that I've built, then you'll see that a couple of tasks will pop up. And if I select a task, in here are a set of handlers. And depending on the handler, if I open this up, there are different rules that are applied. And eventually you could have arguments that then point to that data model, calling out specific types to check and make sure they're checked in or other things. So it's very important to understand, or at least have somebody on hand that does, when working with this system. Just to kind of reinforce this a little bit, the table configurator is also something that if you select it, you're looking specifically at whether or not the configuration has something in it, and those things are the real names of objects, which derive from that location in the BMIDE. So if I come in here and I select a table, you'll see references to those properties, and these properties are called real name properties. The actual name that the user sees is over here. And then it'll tell you where in that BMIDE those properties come from. So without a full understanding of that BMIDE, it would be very hard to do the table configurator. Query Builder, same thing. If we come in here, this one is going to essentially probe the schema for real names and different classes that you need to search on, and if without an understanding of that, it would be hard. So without reinforcing my point even further, Just note that some of these may also be across into infrastructure architects like indexing and search administration. So this one is useful to administrators, but it's set up and organized by infrastructure architects. Now, if your company is a little smaller, you may be the same person in your company doing all of these different tasks, or if it's larger, you may have several teams on each task. But administration in Teamcenter and Active Workspace encompasses all of this, as well as reporting tools and other capabilities that you can use to tune the system to your will, to your business cases, and to your comfort. I hope that you enjoyed this video, as this is kind of the start to our 2412 administration overview videos. Now we will do each thing, each people, access, workflow designer at kind of a higher level first, and then we'll have more specific use cases that we hammer down into in later videos. So we thank you for joining, and we'll see you in the next one.